And we welcome in our PGA insider, Keith Stewart, to the show this morning. Keith, how are we feeling? Golf in good hands right now, apparently.
Well, I tell you, whether you're a fan of the LPGA or the PGA Tour, you got to feel pretty good. The alphas are out there and they're doing their job. Nelly wins 5 in a row. Scotty wins 4 of his last 5, including a green jacket. It's pretty exciting times for golf.
No, it certainly is. And by the way, when we talk about having a PGA insider, sometimes we take a look back and say, well, what's that PGA insider adding to the benefit here of the SportsGrid network? How about winners? How about last week calling the double-double here on our network, Keith? How about that?
Yeah, Carver, he said, what are we going to do with Scotty? He asked me every week, what are we doing with Scotty? So leading into last week, I said, you know what? I'm parlaying Scotty with Nelly. They're both basically untouchable at this point. I mean, Nelly's odds going into the Chevron, which was their first major championship of the year. She'd finished 3rd there the year before. Her odds were plus 550, and the next closest competitor was plus 2,500. They were 5X. Wow. And then, of course, we've seen what Scotty's done. He won the Masters by 4 over one guy and 7 over the rest of the field. I mean, he barely came in second in Houston. So I said, you know what? I said, the only way we can make some money off these folks is that we put them together, and I got 30-1. And guess what? It happened, which, to me was the least surprising thing of the week.
It was not surprising at all. I mean, Scotty he was down 7 strokes, I believe, after his round on Thursday. And everyone's like, yeah, I mean, look, we all know what's happening here. You can get odds now for Scotty to just win the Grand Slam. No big deal. Just win the single year Grand Slam. The FanDuel Sportsbook has him at 60-1. Now, I don't need to tell you. You'd be better off betting all of those as individual winners. You can get much better odds if you parlay them that way. Nelly is effectively doing the same thing on the LPGA Tour. I suppose my question for you, I think it's unquestionably good for women's golf to have someone being this dominant because it's just going to make someone more likely to flip the channel over there. But do you think that Scotty's dominance is as good for the PGA Tour? I mean, me personally, I'm going to watch golf regardless. I don't find Scheffler to be that inspiring or motivating. In fact, it's more frustrating because it makes betting these events so much more difficult. But do you think overall it's good right now in a very tenuous spot for the PGA Tour to have someone playing this dominant?
Davis, I think it's very good for the PGA Tour to have Scottie Scheffler be this good. And the reason I say that, 2 reasons. One, I'll use a golf example, and the first would be Tiger Woods. When Tiger was dominating the tour, there were a lot of people that were on the periphery of golf that would start to pay attention because these guys start doing historic things. And then the other thing would be, how about Caitlin Clark? I mean, when she started to dominate women's basketball, everyone starts to pay attention. So when golf is a different winner every week, or where we started this season out with like 7 long shots in a row, people just aren't paying attention. And then all of the conversation around LIV, and there's confusion and like who's on what tour and everything. Everybody knows where Scottie Scheffler's playing, when he's playing, and that's good for golf. And as far as, Wyndham Clark was in the press room last week and he said, he was asked, do you think there's a gap between you and Scotty? And he said, reluctantly, yes, I think there is, but guess what? That makes me work harder. So if the next echelon of guys, that next class is working harder, the Cantleys, the Wyndham Clarks, the Xander Schauffele's, then it gets more and more exciting as we head into all of these major championships.
Keith, talk to me here about also the dominance of Scottie Scheffler, because once we used to see, and again, we're not really comparing him to Tiger Woods just yet, but Tiger-like, you can say, it used to be like, oh my goodness, you could hear Tiger Woods charging up the leaderboard, and everybody was afraid that eventually he was going to overtake the leader and win the tournament. You saw last week at the RBC, and if we even go back to the Masters, he's on baby watch here. One of the toughest tournaments that you can possibly win with other things on your mind. He won that. Flies home, flies back to the RBC, wins that. But the way he won it was unbelievable. It wasn't like he came out here, Keith, and was like, well, I torched round number 1 with 9 under. Round number 2, I went 7 under. I was in walking distance of just, passing through those final 2 rounds. He was down 7, 8 strokes and still won by multiple strokes. It's unbelievable what he's doing on the golf course.
Well, if you look back to a year ago, just at the Heritage, between that Heritage and this one, he's had 21 starts. Of that, he's only had 3 of those finish outside the top 10. He's only had 6 of them outside the top 5. His level of consistency is unbelievable. And as a result, if you go back to the Masters, you look at the guys who are starting to play with him, he's starting to exert his dominance. He's starting to, make guys force the issue, that he's making guys play out of their comfort zone, trying to raise their own ceiling, of which maybe they just don't have the talent to do. He's become the marker. And, you go back to when Tiger was at his, his height of his power, everyone knew that until Tiger teed off on Thursday, you just didn't know where you stood in the tournament, or until he teed off on Friday. And now Scotty is putting himself in that same position. Even though he only shot two under last week down there at the RBC in the first round, everybody knew they were just waiting for Scotty to put up a round and a number, so they knew where they stood in the tournament. And then when you play alongside him like Jordan did, it's just really difficult to try and keep up mentally, because you're like, geez, I have to be better. I have to be better. And it forces you to make decisions that basically you're just not comfortable with. So I love the fact that now that there's a total alpha dog out there, and on the lady side as well, that when you play with these people are starting to, fall by the wayside, or maybe they'll do something historic themselves, which is all really, really entertaining and exciting.
All right, let's go down to the Zurich Classic. This is, of course, our marquee team event here on the PGA Tour. Huge, unbelievable odds for Patrick Cantlay and Xander Schauffele. We've got Rory and Lowry after them. I've got a bet in on this event. Austin Eckroat and Chris Gotterup. What do you make of this event, or do we have any plays here?
I think we definitely have some plays here, but if you look at, they've done this team event for 7 years, and the average pre-tournament winner's odds is right around 30-1. So I think in that middle tier is where you're going to find your best value. For me, my early leans this week on the early line are 2 teams. I love Tom Hoge and Maverick McNally. McNally, top 10 at the Players. Hoge, what he did last week at the Heritage. And then my second team, I love the Canadian combination of Nick Taylor and Adam Hadwin at plus 4,000. Those 2 guys, if you remember last year at the Canadian Open, when Taylor won and Hadwin, when Hadwin got tackled, trying to spray him with champagne, those guys have serious chemistry. And I think that's what you need this week to take home the Zerk Classic title.